What's going on, guys? Gomes here back again on another MLB The Show 19 Diamond Dynasty video. Today we are going to be doing something quite different. This is something I like to call Mythbusters, and it's something that I might want to try. It's kind of like a series on my channel. I do remember Cardinal Bird did make a video similar to this like back in MLB 16 or 17, so shout out to him for giving me this idea. By the way, please come back if you are out there. I think we all miss Cardinal Bird's content, but what I want to do, this is a question I've asked myself all season long because I've went through catches like Joe Torre. I recently put Jimmy Fox behind the plate, who obviously that is a secondary position and that's not exactly where he should be playing. I want to see how much the blocking rating truly matters. So what I did is I enlisted 3 catchers. I do have to do this within the regular rosters because that's the only way I can use 2 controllers, so I can be able to do this by myself and control it the right way that I wanted to. So the first contestant and the highest blocking player that we are going to use is Yadier Molina. I did not change their offensive stats for obvious reasons because we're not going to use that, but I did change his fielding, and that is exactly how his 98 overall signature series card looks defensively. He is the highest tier with 96 blocking. The second tier player we're going to look at, or rather the second tier player mulligan, is Gary Carter for the Washington Nationals. He's going to have 85 blocking, and he's going to be, you know, like the middle tier guy. 85 is still, you know, pretty damn good. And then of course Yadier Molina is like the elite of the elite. And then finally Jorge Posada is going to be the last guy we're going to look at, and he's got 75 blocking, so pretty much 10 down each time you step down the ladder. 96 for signature Molina, then you have 85 for Gary Carter, and then 75 for Jorge Posada. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 100 balls with each of them. Basically I'm just going to throw a curveball and see if they can block it. I'm going to throw it down below in the dirt, and pretty much the way I'm going to count whether or not it was a good block is they can keep it in front of them. You know, if it goes, you know, behind them or goes way and juts out way to the side, that I won't consider as a successful block. You want your catcher to block it and keep it in front of them, so then you can stop runners from advancing another base. So that's what we're going to be looking at, and yeah, I'm going to come back at you guys once I have all these results done. Like I said, taking 100 balls, and then we'll talk about it a little bit later then on. So we'll see you guys then. Okay, first a few things I want to say. We did add Brian McCann into the mix. He has equipped with 90 blocking. I wanted another guy to go ahead and test out, and then here's some scenarios in blocking. You see, that is ideal for Yadi. Kept it right in front of him. Right here, once again, does not have to move very far at all. Another nice block, and once again, those are all good blocks. Here are examples of what I did not count as a block. Of course, that goes quite a bit behind him. Right here, that happened a lot where it would hit off the catcher, so that does not count as well because it's more so a bailout. And then these two you're gonna see right here, they don't necessarily get that far from him, but I did not count those as a block. Even though Yadi did get there quick, they do not count as a block in this simulation. So of course the first subject that we are going to be talking about is Yadier Molina. He is the best blocking out of all the 4 candidates that we did have within this simulation. He has 96 blocking. I believe that's the best in the game. If it's not the best, it's, you know, right up there with Yvonne Rodriguez Pudge as the best. And it was a little bit interesting because honestly, for each and every single person, I expected a lot better block success rate. Yadier Molina was 65 for 100, so 65% of blocking, which I expected better. He has damn near, you know, like I said, the best blocking in the game, so I really expected him to do a better job. It's not that he didn't do awful. If you think about it, 65 out of 100 balls in reality is probably pretty good considering what you know, my standards for counting it as a block. So it was pretty decent, but I still expected a little bit better. I did notice a couple things, and I quickly want to mention the variables within this subject. So every single pitcher was always a right-hander. I never used lefties. They were all righties to each and every of the 4 catchers for all 100 of the balls that they had to try to block. I only threw curveballs. Some of them were knuckle curveballs, but a regular curveball and knuckle curveballs were the only two pitches that I threw the entire time. I always had the starter. I usually pick the starter, of course, a righty with the curveball. Would always throw the first 50 attempts for the catcher, and then I'd bring in another righty reliever with the curveball to finish it out. And then this was on Hall of Fame difficulty. I'm not too sure if that changes things, but it was on Hall of Fame difficulty for pitching, which is what would affect fielding if at all possible. There's no actual fielding difficulty, so those are the variables that we had within there, and it was kind of weird. So I did play around with it a little bit. I didn't just always throw curveballs straight up. I kind of threw them to the sides a little bit. Funny enough, a lot of times when I threw them a bit out to the sides, and this was for all four of the subjects, they seemed to block a little bit better. For whatever reason, they seemed to have a little bit better chance of blocking it if it weren't straight up, which doesn't really make any sense, because if you're blocking it straight up opposed to like going to the sides, you'd figure that's more difficult, but that was not the case in this subject. Like I said, Yadier Molina was 65 for 165%. There were times where he was just hot, where he was like blocking every single thing in sight, and then there were also times when he struggled a bit, and that kind of was the same thing. It was really streaky for a lot of these guys. Overall, I thought he did pretty well. I do have to say, even though he only blocked 65 out of 100, I think it's because all this rest of his defensive stats are so good. I think that's what's going to make him so effective, because he has the regular diamond fielding, 90 plus fielding, and I think that helped him get better and faster sliding animations to scoop up the ball. And then of course he is an absolute cannon, so that also helped. I of course wasn't trying to advance because I had my secondary controller you know, performing for the batters, so it would stay consistent with that. But it was definitely interesting with Yadier Molina, and yeah, let's move on to our second test subject. So as you guys know, Brian McCann was kind of thrown in there. He was the last guy that I did perform with. It was kind of spur of the moment. I was like, I have some extra time, might as well have a fourth candidate and test him out. Brian McCann did have 90 blocking, so he had the second highest. He was right in between, sandwiched between the two, between Yadi and Gary Carter. And I wanted to have, you know, like 90, because I always think 90 is like the threshold for some things, at least in this game. You know, it is for like fielding. Always once you get 90, 80, 70, and so on for fielding, that equates to, you know, 90s diamond, 80s gold, and so on and so forth. So Brian McCann stopped 48 out of 100, so that is considerably less than Yadier Molina. That is 17% less than he did, and I do think 100 is a pretty good sample size. Of course, if I really wanted to get crazy, I could do like 500 balls with each, but I think 100 is pretty fair, and you get the gist of it. But Brian McCann, like I said, he has 90 blocking. He was very streaky. He was more streaky than Yadier Molina, that I would say. And that goes to show, because he just doesn't have quite as good blocking. But this is easily the guy I was surprised the most about, considering that he was right in between Gary Carter and Yadier Molina. He only had 6 less blocking, and he stopped 17 less balls. That is pretty crazy, if I do say so myself, how 6 blocking can equate to that many more balls being blocked according to the standards. It was pretty crazy. Maybe, I don't really know if it has anything to do, because Brian McCann only has 81 fielding regularly and 74 reaction. That's another variable. Of course, these catchers don't have the same fielding or reaction as one another. They have similar, but it is not the same, so maybe that has something to do with it. But you would think just straight up the blocking attribute would, you know, be the only thing that really affects you blocking the ball well or not. So Brian McCann, I wouldn't say he did decently. I was pretty disappointed. 90 blocking, and he stopped less than 50% of the balls that we threw to him. So I think he's the most disappointed. I'm the most disappointed in him out of any 4 of these. And yeah, like I said, 90 blocking opposed to Yadier's 96, and he stopped 17% less baseballs. On to our third subject, we're looking at Gary Carter. He's the one who had 85 blocking, so he had 5 less than Brian McCann, and he would have had 9 less than, or rather 11 less than Yadier Molina. So it still would be in the gold tier classify for Gary Carter, but not quite in the 90s like Brian McCann or Yadier Molina, which is interesting, because he blocked the exact same amount of baseballs that Brian McCann did. He had 85 blocking opposed to McCann's 90, and he blocked the same amount right at 48. Gary Carter, it took him like 8 tries to even get one, which was pretty crazy, and it was pretty frustrating right away. It's like, bro, what the hell's wrong? You know, it's 85 blocking. That's pretty good. How is it taking you like 8 times? It took him until, I believe, the 9th try to actually, it might have been the 8th or 9th, but it still took him quite some time to actually block one. But then he started getting into a groove, and he ended up with 48 out of 100. I think if he started better, he easily could have got over 50% and even been better than Brian McCann. So that's where like these results are a little wish-washy, that he has less blocking, but he blocked the same amount of balls. Once again, all righties, all curveballs, starter through 50, and then the reliever through 50 on Hall of Fame difficulty. As I mentioned with like where I threw it, whether it was like kind of in the middle or on the sides, I made sure I did it for each catcher, and I didn't have like a number of how many I did for each, but every so often I'd throw one to the left side, one of the right side, and all of them, like I said, more or less did pretty good on those ones to the sides. And for whatever reasons, the curveballs that you threw straight up, you would figure would be the easiest for them to block because they don't have to slide, was actually quite difficult. Gary Carter, what I did for this is I took 10 at a time and then took the stats down. So 10's just an easy number I can remember in my head, you know, as I'm going. Okay, he's 4 for 4, now he's 4 for 5, he missed another, he's 4 for 6, and Gary Carter was consistently getting like 5 out of 10s towards the end, you know, which goes to show. But yeah, he definitely started slow. He ended up towards 50%, tying Brian McCann. So he had 11 less blocking than Yadier Molina, but he still blocked 17 less, the same amount of Brian McCann. So that was definitely interesting, and goes to show why I was so disappointed in Brian McCann's performance. And finally, our last test subject was Jorge Posada, who came in with 75 blocking. By far the lowest that we did test. That would be 21 less blocking than Yadier Molina, who was the highest at 96. And then he would have had 10 less blocking than Gary Carter. And then that would have been 15 less blocking than Brian McCann. Jorge Posada blocked 45 out of 100, so 45%. 3 less than Gary Carter and Brian McCann, despite having 10 less than Gary Carter and 15 less than Brian McCann. Another point to show why I was so disappointed in Brian McCann. And this is where I kind of thought like the other fielding metrics can't really matter too much for blocking baseballs, because Jorge Posada has like 75 regular fielding, which is pretty, you know, not the best, especially in accordance to Yadier Molina, Brian McCann, and Gary Carter. But 45, you know, he definitely started slow as well. It didn't take him as long to get a block as Gary Carter, but he, you know, he did all right for what it's worth. 75 blocking, like I said, easily the lowest out of the 4 that we tested, and he blocked 45. That is still lower than 50%. And also the thing with Yadier Molina, he is this, or not Yadier Molina, but Jorge Posada, he is the slowest out of them. Brian McCann is also pretty slow. Gary Carter and Yadi have a little bit more speed. So in general, not just looking at how many balls they blocked, I think that's definitely going to help them, for the simple fact that they can get to the balls that they don't block or keep right in front of them quicker. So I think that's really important. And then Yadi had, of course, a really good arm. Jorge Posada did not have much of an arm at all. And then Brian McCann had a 77 arm strength. So Jorge Posada, for what it's worth, though, I was pleasantly surprised. He was the 3rd guy that I tested. I tested in this order: Yadi, Gary Carter, Posada, then McCann. So yeah, Jorge Posada, I was pretty surprised with that. He had 10 less blocking than Gary Carter and relatively blocked the same number. You figure 3 less. You're not really going to notice that in the grand scheme of things. It's pretty much the same. So in reality, Posada, Gary Carter, and Brian McCann kind of all performed the exact same. And then Yadier Molina was way over them. Posada had 20 less blocks, and then Gary Carter and McCann had 17 less blocks than Yadier Molina. So far and away, he was the best out of all of them, and everybody else, despite their blocking, kind of performed the same. You know, a 15 differential between Brian McCann and Jorge Posada, and they relatively did the exact same performance blocking baseball. So that was the biggest surprise for me, and it goes to show, in my opinion, blocking is not that huge of a stat. At least I don't think so in Diamond Dynasty. Of course, once you're in the upper echelon of players like Yadier Molina, like once you surpass 95 blocking, I think that's where you're going to really notice results. But 90 blocking opposed to 75, it was pretty much the same thing. I was going to try somebody with like below 60 or below 70, but I was a little short on time, so I did not want to do another player. I could possibly do this in the future and like just leave a comment down below and let you guys know how he performed, but it was definitely very interesting. I had fun doing it, and it was a little like myth busting opportunity to see whether or not the blocking attribute actually makes a difference within Diamond Dynasty, within your cards. So this can go to show maybe you don't need the best defensive catcher, because you guys know I ran Jimmy Fox for a while, and he's the guy who I wanted to test and see how he did. And Jimmy Fox performed just as well as Joe Torre, even though Joe Torre had about 80 blocking, and he never seemed to block balls really that well for me, at least in my opinion. So it's really interesting in my opinion. Let me know down below in the comments section, are you guys surprised by these results, and how are you going to change your minds on what catches that you guys pick up in the future after seeing this video? If you guys did enjoy it, please make sure to leave a thumbs up. Definitely would appreciate it. And if you guys want to see me do more of these myth busting opportunities, if you guys want me to try out and test different stuff, make sure leave me suggestions down below in the comment section, and I will gladly go ahead and try to get that out for you guys as well. Once again, if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to like down below. Hope you guys have a great day. There goes out.